rest of the mob may appear at any point.
That's fine.
Deal with that when it happens.
Yeah, no problem. They can be part of it, or we can finish up, depending on how much we cover.
Yeah. Cool bananas.
Ready to roll?
Yep.
This is the Andrew Lake Podcast, and I am in the ambience of the Byrd Den. What do you call a collective bird sanctuary? An arbitrarium?
Oh. It's got a ring to it, arbitrarium.
Well, that's like the plant thing out on...
Arboretum.
Oh, the arboretum, yeah.
I thought you were taking arbitrary and
telling you that it's
expanding it.
arbitrary. It's not arbitrary. This is great. I like this place. Just before we went on air, you were saying that you like listening to ambient sound better than podcasts.
I like to listen to the place I'm in. I like to kind of... It's about being present, you know?
Should we say hello to the kids and Mum?
Team?
Only not blowing smoke.
I didn't say there was smoke being blown.
Hoon.
Hoon.
Your girlfriend?
Blower of smoke.
Blower of smoke. Is she your girlfriend?
Yeah.
Or your wife?
I don't know. How long do you have to be a girlfriend to become a wife? That's for lawyers to decide.
Oh, okay. You don't get bogged down in that, do you?
No.
So your name is Byrd.
Yeah.
Is that the name you were born with?
No.
How did you get the name Byrd?
I chose the name Byrd.
And how do you spell it? It's B-Y-R-D, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen it spelled B-E-R-D before.
Yeah. Because I get sick of writing Y sometimes. Right. It's only 4 letters and you're doing it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get sick of that shape or just the flow of it. Yeah.
And your last name's Meltdown.
Yeah.
Or is that like the crew name?
That's a crew name. Yeah. And
why the name Meltdown? Sounds like you're having a nervous breakdown.
yeah, I don't know. That was the crew name that I drifted into, so I didn't get
So it was a crew before you joined?
Yeah. I got the invite.
The invite. Who gave you the invite?
A tune, probably.
A tune?
Yeah.
That's his name?
Yeah.
Was he born with that name?
No, I think he's drifted into that name too.
Drifted into that name. Yeah, I'm quite used to people having multiple names.
Yeah. Well, even in the family, we have different names amongst ourselves, so, you know.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So,
what is a name anyway? That's a philosophical question.
whoa.
What does
How
a
long
name
does this run
imply? Well, if you can answer it.
Yeah. No, I've just been up north on a community up there, and, you know, there's a lot of name stuff up there too, you know, different patterns and pathways to it. So, yeah, that's a big topic. Yeah. So
you are an artist?
Yeah.
Is that what you say you are? Or what are you?
That's what I am, sure.
Occupation-wise, among other many things.
Yeah.
Of course,
so
you are many things.
It depends who you're standing in front of and what you're trying to get out of them. What you call
right,
yourself.
that's true. That is
so,
true.
You know, it's like the names. It changes. Different roles in different spaces. Yes, so many different roles, so many different spaces. So I exist as an artist, which means then that I exist in multiple kind of, we'll say roles again, for want of a new word at this point. You do 100 things to cover your bases, you know, to get your rent paid. You teach a bit.
Just before I turned up, you were running a workshop.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
Is that a regular gig or just
that's
whenever
the
it comes
first
around?
version that I've done in that style. But yeah, they pop up. So again, for different organisations, you do different things. So in the Territory, that was actually an artist in schools residency run through the Northern Territory Department of something, probably education. So they were paying for me to go to that community school and work with the kids there. Show them how to use a can.
A spray can?
Yeah.
Is that one of your main mediums, would you say? Or tools? Like what How would you? Well, probably if we should back up a bit and say, how would you describe your art to someone who's never seen it before? If they want to get a picture in their head of the sort of things like, is it portraiture with oils?
No, I don't. I deliberately don't do portraiture because that involves hanging out with someone and having to talk to them. Yeah, I don't go to the hairdresser.
You're putting me on the spot now. You realise what you're doing. Hanging out with someone and talking to them.
Yeah.
So you can't get off this question. How would you describe your art to someone? Like what medium, what
So there's two primary modes. I build things and I paint things. And sometimes I build things and paint them. Basically. That's, a bit flat, a bit of lumpy. And
so sculptor,
painter.
You sculpt them out of clay?
No, I build things. So I tend to work with I choose to work with reclaimed materials. So I'd rather not buy something new and build something out of it when there's lots of stuff lying around not being used, just deteriorating, or and that's sort of where the sport of graffiti and all that stuff comes into. It's making use of spaces. Like I'm interested in the reuse or the repurposing of stuff, and so that's one of the fun things that graffiti guys do, is to move through a place and say, oh, that bit of place there could be used differently. It could have my name on it.
So are you a graffiti artist? Or is that just an element of what you do?
Yeah, it's an element. It's not a...
Isn't graffiti illegal?
That's like names. There's a great big ball of string there that wants untying. Like, that's a big, big, knotty...
It's a ball of contradictions?
Yeah.
Depending on who you're standing in front of?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. The magistrate or somebody in a pub.
Have you ever been standing in front of the magistrate?
So far, no.
No?
No, only the guys in blue. And mostly I've talked out of those. There's... I don't know. Yeah, it's a funny thing. It's an interesting thing because it's so knotty. It's a way of doing things. It's a way of, like I say, it's a way of reading the city and making the city, reclaiming it. Typically it's a city thing because of the infrastructure required, especially if you're going to be a classic, proper graffiti writer. You need trains, which means you need railway lines, which means you need enough people in a big enough place that there are trains and railway lines. Yeah, that's why there's no writers in Canberra.
Yeah. Okay. So a graffiti writer, by this working definition, is someone who paints trains and paints a name.
Yeah.
And you'd say that that's only a small portion of, or elements of that world, or that subculture, are only a small part of your overall artistic approach?
Yeah.
Is that a fair
I'm not
summarization?
There's not enough there to hold my attention, probably.
Yeah.
So I need other things
in
to do.
In terms of content and...
Yeah, and action. Like you could put a lot of yourself into that and just do that, but I kind of, I don't know if admire is the right word, but I do appreciate people who can do that. I appreciate, well, let's say admire and respect those crew that do the same letters in the same style, in different colours sometimes, every other week for 20 years. How do they do that? They're achieving something. I don't know what it is and I don't know how, but it's an achievement. And I just don't, it doesn't satisfy me. That it's a different way of doing it. So it's kind of like, I don't know. a pencil's a pencil. We can all agree what a pencil is, but what each of us does with a pencil is infinitely variable. And graffiti's the same. It's just a thing. But I'd say graffiti essentially is letters. That's it. Just doing letters. Whether you're taking the space you're doing the letters on and taking the materials you're doing the letters with, whether the letters are on a mobile ground or a permissioned ground, doesn't matter. If you're doing letters, you're doing graffiti.
So as we're sitting here talking in this lovely ambience, you're working on something. Does that involve letters? So you've got some paper there and
Not
a
this
Stanley
one.
knife.
Yep.
So I can't really see from here, but is it letters?
No
So-
letters here. This is just a stencil. This is a figure.
So it's a figure. So your content or your subject material is not always letters.
No.
Even when you're not doing your sculptor side, you're also
Yeah.
using... I think I've seen like actual birds come up quite
Yeah.
a lot. So your theme is the bird.
Well, birds are nice to do. Nice in profile. They're not very pretty when they're looking straight at you. My subject matter ranges widely. And again, that's kind of a bit of a hunger thing and a bit of a something else slightly more derogatory than hunger. It's not a lack of focus, but it's a kind of stuff's always coming in, and so you can't block it out. There's always stuff coming in, and then sometimes it comes back out as other things. So I'm always making pictures, and whether the pictures are word pictures or pictures, and it's just a case of trying to land them in the most useful way. Yeah. What useful is another great big knot. But yeah, I like if you can imagine you got chooks and they lay lots of eggs and you can't eat all the eggs, so you sell some of the eggs to your neighbours, which means you can buy chook food to feed the chooks, to keep the chooks. So they're basically, it's kind of like a loop feeding itself.
And that's how your economics works for your art?
Yeah, so if I can move units, that means it's covering itself. So if I'm doing things, so in that way, your classic graffiti stuff isn't self-sustaining. It's all outgoing. It's all gifts. It's all cultural gifts to the broader public. There's no return on that. So if you're going to do that, you need to have other ways of covering your rent and food stuffs. And
It sounds like, though, when you say that for your economics, you would make the art even if you couldn't make money from it. Like
Probably.
You've got a creative need to express something.
Yeah. So I'm incessantly, something's happening.
So you've always got this flow of creativity.
Yeah, I carry a sketchbook around with me all the time. And
Have you ever had writer's block or creative block where you felt like you needed something to come out? Or you've had a project or a commission where you've been needed to create something, come up with something with a deadline, and it's been a bit of a stress to get it done under those pressures?
Totally. Yeah. Where there was one point where I was painting a lot and working through my backlog of notebooks, because in your notebook, it might be an idea you put down to come back to. It might be an incidental thing. It might be a thinking. So you might be practicing something. You might be testing something. You might be recording something. You might put something in there and never come back to it. Or it might be something you reference again and again. You never know. And there was a point where I'd kind of burnt through what I thought was all the viable... I was painting so much that I'd burnt through my backlog of notebooks and things that I thought were worth trying to do. And yeah, it was like, oh, shit. Kind of, I'm too busy painting from them to put things in them to cook up the next thing. And what should have happened in saying this is that I should have been looking at what I was painting and stepping on that and painting the next thing instead of just doing this small loop. So it's a block, not block
So your creative process is separating ideas and what you put into existence. So your notebook is a structure or an idea that you would spring off, and then you would actualize it in a bigger space with more colors, more medium, more whatever.
Yeah.
And that process would be going back and forth between the two.
Yeah,
And
ideally.
that loop would be what you're talking about, that loop of going in and out of those two extremes.
Yeah, and it kind of grows itself. Like you're kind of doing more and reflecting and getting more from what you're reflecting. Ideally. Like I think that's one of the things that blows my mind about writers that do the same letters for decades. They're not...
Graffiti writers.
Yeah, graffiti writers, to
Yep.
be explicit.
I'm just trying to
Yeah.
keep it in line with people that know that,
Yeah.
or that might be listening that might not know that
Yep.
term, writers.
Yep. No, that
Yep.
makes total sense. Better broaden your audience. So, graffiti writers who write the same letters the same way every time they do it, and they do that for decades. And so you'll see it and you'll go, oh, there's a such and such a piece. And then you'll go, oh, there's that piece again. And there's that piece again. And they're all city or whatever. But it's just exactly the same. It's neat, it's clean, it's in a hard to get spot. That's fantastic. And I'm going, but what's satisfying you in doing that? And it's not the painting of it.
It's not the aesthetics.
No,
It's more about
it's the getting up. It's the being there. So
process.
it's that, yeah. So this guy might have, for example, a 9 to 5 that's killing him, and this is the one thing. This is his little bit of soul food, and so it's not important to him that it changes or that it gets. Not, I don't want to say better, but that it change. He's not reflecting on what he did and going, oh, if I make that letter bigger and change the weight of how they cluster together, it'll do this in the space. That's not what he's doing. He's getting out there and he's painting it, and it's clean and it's up, and everyone can see it next week, and that gets him through the weekend, and then he's drudgery again, and that's fine. 10 years of that, good luck to you, thanks for coming. But that's not for me. Like, I can't.
So a dichotomy is coming up in my mind between the aesthetics and how you feel about the process. So when you create something, you have a feeling that goes along with creating it. And it sounds like to me you've got this picture of the guy who creates the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
But the feeling, because of the space or external conditions or how it's contrasted to the rest of his week, is enough for him to keep going through that and to keep going in that direction.
Yeah, the engine's completely different. Like that's that's totally satisfied whatever drove him to do that. Him, her, it, they're satisfied. So for me, the satisfaction is different. So
it's the aesthetics or how it looks.
I mean, I might be completely stoked with the production of a thing and do it 3 or 4 times and be still happy with it. But then there'll be some new input or something will shift. I also find it really hard, like when we were talking before about the ambience of a space and being in a place. So having the noise of a space where you're doing something, shutting out all that stuff is really hard too. So that mode of production where you're taking a fixed thing and plonking it into a place, wherever the place is, it's always fixed and locked. It's not responding to its environment. It's a separate thing, and it stays separate even in that environment where it lands, and I can't quite do that.
Okay, I want to drill into this.
Yeah.
I think this is important. So the question is, how does an environment influence the aesthetics or the process or the experience of making an artwork?
What a weird question.
Can
How does
you-
it not?
Can you
Everything feeds
quantify
into
it?
Yeah, totally. So you've got...
Where would you draw lines, pull levers, isolate principles?
Okay, so you've got straight up the sound of a space we've been talking about. Different places you're in, different sounds, different... the volume of what's going on, never mind the frequency or whatever, whether there's birds. Like this is lovely because there's lots of little birds in and out. Oh. Nice lemon.
This is good cake.
Mm.
Tea and cake in the Byrd arbitrarium.
Nothing's quite as
Nothing,
arbitrary as it
nothing
seems.
is arbitrary. Well, maybe that's a paradox.
Again,
Maybe there's a ball of string there
yeah.
in our definition of arbitrarium. A ball of knots. So you're not getting off this question.
No, I'm circling back to it.
The question that still stands is, how does the environment affect your aesthetics?
So it's about choosing. It's about reading a space. So okay, let's get right into the middle of the knot and work our way out. Space is different to place. So a space is just the mechanics. There's benches, bike seats, old cameras, there's a tree, windows, whatever. Place is where you start to account for the uses of a space, who travels through it, why they travel through it, what kind of things accumulate in it, what kind of sounds, what kind of traffic. So you're taking time and you're taking time into account, and you're spending time in the space to get a sense of it in the round. So how light moves, how the air moves, all that sort of stuff.
So a space has a time.
Place has more to it. Space is the small one. Yeah, it's a weird.
Space has different flavors throughout the day.
Yeah.
And place is just a pinpoint or a photograph of a space.
Yeah. So parking you here in the shady corner takes place into account, rather than you just arbitrarily landing over there and getting roasted and having to move. Yeah, that's about place. And so you come into a space and you make a reading so that it becomes a place, and then you can start to make decisions about what kind of thing you might do to it to accentuate or amplify parts of it. So a thing I like to do is to bring attention to a part of a space. So you put, so quite simply, if you've got a big rectangle wall and you just paint the bottom left corner, and so that's what that does then, is put a weight on it that throws the rest of it out. So someone looking at it's immediately going to go, why didn't they paint the whole thing? What's happening there? And so they're already starting to slow down and be in the place.
But conversely, you could make that an intentional thing, as to accentuate a blank wall by painting only part of it.
Totally. Yeah.
So intentionality is a part of the process.
Totally. Yeah. You've got to be, whatever you do has got to be apparently deliberate.
I feel like my philosophical gun is coming out. I
Right.
need to shoot you.
Mm-hmm.
What is intentionality?
What is intentionality? Is that choices?
So
Is
you're
that
saying-
is
you're
that a
saying-
reflected choice?
I guess, yeah, that's the answer. Well, you're saying
Dodged
what
a
was
bullet.
the word? What was the word you used? Intentionality.
We'll have to play it back and find out.
Replay the tape.
Go to the transcript. Being intentional.
Deliberateness.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yep.
So intentionality, deliberateness,
Yeah.
preemptive, premeditated, planned. Are these all trying to get at the same thing? Are these
And
trying to-
reflecting. You got to chuck a reflecting in there,
reflecting. So this is like after you've done it.
or in the moment as well.
So reflecting on yourself in the moment, or how it's going in the moment.
Yeah.
Responding to the environment.
So that comes back to that whole sticker piece which we didn't call it, so that won't make any sense to anyone else. Yeah,
What's the sticker piece?
The idea of our old mate who's painting the same piece of graffiti over and over again, it's already resolved in his sketchbook and in his mind.
So
he's turning up and just
there's
putting it there.
less of an intentionality to that kind of painting?
There's a different intentionality.
A different intentionality.
So, and so rather than just leaning on graffiti writers the whole time too, there are other artists, gallery artists and stuff who do have practices like that. So someone like, say, Richard Long, whose practice is environment-based, where he does a lot of, and has for nearly 40 years now, things like walking a line in the landscape. So he'll draw a line on the map, quite arbitrarily, and then he'll go and walk that line exactly through the landscape. Or there was another nice one he did, which was a series of circles on the map, and he said, it's going to take me an hour to walk each circle. Even though, the first circle might have been a kilometre loop, and by the time he got to the third one, it was 12 kilometres across who knows what terrain. So he kind of sets out a thing and does it. He does these other things too, circles and squares. So he'll do like...
Yeah, no worries.
Making a ring circle of handprints on the gallery wall with mud from a local river. So it's a beautiful graphic thing, but it also ties to space and place. But anyway, so he's been doing that for 40 years. He'll have a gallery show and he'll get mud from a nearby river and make a circle on the wall of the gallery every time.
But are you saying that's not a product then? You know how...
Not that it's not a product, but that it's a type of practice that's not for me. I mean, it interests me that people can do that. I'm more interested in how he can keep doing that than I am in doing that myself. If that makes more sense.
So I'm seeing two virtues come to mind. One is the amount the aesthetics change, or how different each idea is and how it's expressed, and process.
Okay.
So it sounds to me like you're saying it's better to be different every time. Is that what it boils down to? Or to have a changing way of appearing your ideas?
No, well, it doesn't need to be different. And yes, it does.
Every iteration that you do is different. I would
Yeah.
quite confidently say
Yeah. Fair enough.
you
Yep.
don't easily, even when you're making editions of things, and you're quite more than 100% capable of making the same thing exactly, or a version of the same thing, or work in series and work in editions. But I think that you've struggled to want to do anything twice exactly the same way.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem to,
Well, it doesn't have the same, I
even
guess,
though it's
exploring.
body
Or
of work, research body of work. Like you wouldn't build one taxi in a gallery out of cardboard and then build a better one in the next gallery and a much better one in the next gallery and then the perfect one, and then keep doing the better perfect taxi in another 10 galleries. It would
Yeah.
be very hard for you to do that.
Yeah. It's true.
Am I allowed to talk?
Yeah.
If you want, I guess. It might not come up very well, though, that's all.
Okay.
We should probably
There'll be a...
Then I'll just keep
get a
quiet. I'll
get a
just-
third microphone.
No. I'm a talker, but
Just yell your point.
I think maybe we should have we can have another episode with Hoon.
True. That would be a
If you'd
lovely...
like.
I felt very invited when you beckoned me over, so I came over happily.
Well, I just get the vibe of this place like it's just we're chilling. It's a pretty chill place.
That's good.
Byrd is a pretty chilled sort of guy.
Yeah.
Why are you so chilled, Byrd?
Mm.
Why do you talk like that?
He grew up in the fray of a big family.
Yeah, you've got to make your own space.
How many kids?
5.
So you're one of 5?
Yeah.
Mummy and daddy as well?
Yeah, so 7 all up, I suppose. Yep.
So you need one more?
Yeah. yeah. No.
No? You must be a pretty successful artist then, if you can support all these guys and have this sweet bird den,
Oh, yeah.
would you say?
Some days yes, some days no. Yeah.
What does the define success?
Nothing
That's a
we've
good
nothing
question.
we've talked about yet is definitive. So
Well, that's the question then. What is
Yeah.
a successful artist? Paying the rent.
The next conversation will be locking in some definitions.
Working
The research
definitions.
question.
yeah. Yeah. Getting to do stuff. I don't know. We're in the process actually of redefining what is. And how to, so that-
Shift our gears.
Yeah. So it's very easy to go from project to project and just cover your bases, and just get by and do interesting things.
Really, you think that's easy? Guess it depends who you ask, but some
Yeah.
people would say just getting to the point where you can cover bases
But it's
as an artist, doing
not
what you want is
financial.
quite...
It's not financial for us. It's like we're poverty line.
Yeah, there's no nest egg.
Mm.
So,
Well, that's what he means is getting by. It's just on the bare minimum getting by.
Yeah. Well, in my mind, as a younger me would say that the idea of success is just doing what you want and getting by, because you've escaped the job doing what you want on the side
yeah.
trick, which is very different to doing what you want all the time.
Well, it
and
becomes a
not
new trick
having
because then it becomes
the nest egg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is one version of success. But then what happens is you've got to, it's those chickens paying for their, paying with their eggs. You've got to, for want of another ugly definition, monetize some of your joy. And
Is
so
that a pain in the ass?
It-
Do you ever find that coming into...
it can become quite throbbing.
Changes things.
Yeah.
So your process, artistic process, or your pitch to the commission or government job or whatever,
Yeah.
is influenced by how they want it.
Yeah, well, it depends if it's a competitive tender. So if it's a competitive tender, then you're trying to convince them that you're the one who should get the gig, and so you've got to pitch a thing. It's like baiting a fish or something. You've got to pitch them something they want that still falls within the realm of your happiness, as it were.
Okay, so we don't lose our listeners, or maybe
Yeah.
we bring it a bit back down to earth. Can you give a concrete example? Or
Yeah.
like, what's a project where you had to make a pitch, and what was the medium, what was the subject material, what was the competition, and how did you know
Okay.
about it?
Okay, so
Can I call in there because
yeah, you have to speak up.
I would make a very simple division. I would just say there's experimental practice, which is your studio practice, and then there's gallery practice, and then there's commercial practice. And if you,
What do all those mean?
there are different criteria for each one. Your studio practice is where you're free, is where you're researching, is where you are just doing the thing that you think needs doing as a proper, aesthetic scientist, as a researcher, as a studio practitioner, as a practice-led researcher. That's where you're...
It's where you play.
Yeah, and some artists don't use a studio, but I'm just using that term. Experimental practice or studio where you're testing, you're playing, you're letting go a field, and then
I'd say a lot of your field work
the gallery practice
falls into that.
the gallery
area.
practice is then putting your works under the lens of that industry, or under those paradigms, under the lens of those paradigms, which are the art industry. And then your commercial practice could be even further. So there could be, rather than just dealing with an art commission for an arts body, you might also do it for a community body, for council, for another industry, for anything else that's not strictly arty. So I think there's really like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
there's
okay,
different
so
conditions.
a concrete one was a couple of years ago. I was invited to paint a lift shaft wall, and so I knew another artist from out of town, another guy from Melbourne, and he was invited to come up with this idea. And so then he tapped me and said, "Can you come? We'll paint part of this lift shaft to show them that it'll be a good thing, and then they can approve that, and then we'll move on to actually painting it," sort of thing. So I think we got paid for that bit, possibly, maybe not, because that was a pitch point. So sometimes you're paid for that, sometimes you're not. So the idea was that so that was going to be an art project, I would have called that, because they'd invited us based on our existing practice. "I've seen things you do, come and do a thing for us. What would you like to do? Here, the limit is this space." But then it turned into a more commercial thing because they did a call out and invited, so they needed 4 artists, so they did a call out even though they had 2 of us sort of already. And I don't know where the call out happened, but so they invited other people, picked another 2. We then had to produce a sketch to scale. So the lift shaft was 72 metres high by 2 metres wide. So it's basically like a pencil, if you can imagine doing a drawing on a pencil standing on its end. And we had to produce a scale drawing of what we were going to do. So my drawing was on A4 paper. It was 2 metres long, bits of A4 paper stuck together, end to end. So that the board could then look at it and go, "That's okay, that's not okay." And so then they started to have all these, what do you call them? The parameters started to shift. So first it's just going to be this long skinny thing, and then you get the technical stuff of that. So it's a lift, so it's going to move, so what you paint is going to be animated. So it needs to read as an animation. Here's the speed it'll go at. So the other guy, Al Stark was this other artist, he actually did his drawing and then got his skateboard and rode along beside it and filmed it to see how it would read in motion. You had to go, okay, it's going to animate. You also then had to account for where each floor, so where it's going to stop. So each stop had to be composed. Well, to my mind, it might not have been explicitly, but I figure it's going to be framed every time you stop there. It should read soundly. Then they started talking to us about who the stakeholders were and stuff. So they're saying, okay, it's going to be 190 apartments. Top floor is going to be worth $2 or $3 million. Bottom floor, 30 grand or something. Yeah, something.
So you do better artwork on the top floor than the bottom?
Yeah. Well, you need to have something so that and it'll be a broad range of communities. So it needs to appeal to everyone. But then the guys on the top floor own more of it because it was also a social engineering thing. So what they were doing was they were saying, you get a key card.
Because I live on the top floor, I have to see all of it every day.
Yeah. So yeah, but the guys on the bottom floor, whatever floor you're on, your swipe card will only get you to your floor. So you live on the 4th floor, you're only going to be able to go to the 4th floor. If you want to see more...
I'm getting the image of this giant octopus which keeps growing more and more legs.
Yeah, yeah.
And what is there? There's a pirate movie where there's a giant octopus that comes and eats everyone. Sounds like what this project is.
It comes like that. Like they come like that. And this is before we're actually painting. This is before we actually get to do any making. That's the carrot. Somewhere down the line, I'm going to get to paint. This is all just talking.
Is it a truckload of money to win this gig?
Nah, it worked out about $500 a floor. So, in the scheme of things, that's reasonable, but it's not filthy lucre. We thought...
Where does the competition come in, like the other guys trying to do this?
Oh,
Were you invited for this one?
yeah. Yeah. So this one I was invited, so it was a kind of a short thing. So that wasn't a competitive in the way. But there's more people painting now, more people doing this mural stuff. So a lot of flipping way back. So when you said, what am I doing? I'm an artist. But I work as a commercial artist also. So when Hoon was saying there's the three kind of fields of action, your studio research play fields, your gallery practice, which is kind of like a peer review visibility thing.
And the shop hybrid.
Sort of, yeah. It's a gambling shop. You know, you make 20 works in the hopes that someone else will take them home.
Plus, establish your style and
Yeah, prove that you're still existent and steadily, quality-wise and whatever, and be visible. And then there's commercial stuff, which is totally variable and totally beholden to the client, because it's their space. Because I'm doing murals essentially. It's their space. They ask for what they want, and I try to make the best of what they want. You know, I try to do the nicest thing for them within the framework of their taste and their taste, let's say. So, you know, some of it's awful, and it's never going to be anything but awful. But you don't sign those, and that pays the bill. You know, like, it's good technically. I'm painting a lot of things that I wouldn't choose to paint. So that means...
So it keeps your chops up, your skills up.
Yeah, totally. So it's totally a skill builder, consolidator. Yeah. And my people skills too, you know, because you got to talk. You got to be able to talk to people. Because they...
Is that a skill that you isolate as a thing unto itself?
Yeah. Because they
How do you go with it?
I'm getting better.
Is that a bit invasive, that question?
Yeah. No, I don't know.
Is there an etiquette around the mural community where if you're really good at speaking to people and you're really good at having interactions face to face, you get more gigs? And someone might not be that good technically, maybe. And I see this on the music scene. We're not going to name names or anything, but I see this on the music scene where someone would be not quite as good at the music, at the mechanics or the aesthetics, but they're friends with everyone, so they get the call before the guy who is quite technical.
Yeah, totally.
So do we see that in the art world as
totally.
well?
Yeah. And there's variations on it. So there's the guy who's friends with everybody who gets those gigs. And there's the guy who's a really warm, lively personality. And so he gets another bunch of gigs off that. And neither of those guys are getting gigs on technical, on their production work. It's not coming at the other end. It's coming at the front end. So yeah, it's coming off the interaction. So one's a networker, gets gigs. Another guy is... charismatic and nice to talk to, gets the gigs. The sulky, artistic dude who's putting in all the hard yards in the studio and producing fantastic stuff isn't getting any gigs because he's not talking to anyone. So that's the world over. That's pick your.
And where do you sit?
It's a good question. It varies. Yeah, I drift around. I get chummy with those guys and help them with their gigs.
This is the self-knowledge shotgun.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So
Really got a few different shotguns in the fridge.
Yeah,
Try not to be too violent with them.
There's nobody in your passenger seat. It's all guns.
Shots fired back.
Yeah, I don't know. You need to be able to do things. You need to be able to draw, so I draw. You need to be able to talk, so I talk. You know, I don't go to the hairdresser because I don't want to have to talk to a hairdresser for an hour.
Your hair looks great how it is, mate.
But just lucky. But I need to be able to talk to someone enough if they've asked me to paint something, so that both they and I understand what it is they want, because they might not even really know what they want. They know they've got this space.
Yeah.
and they want it painted, and so then you've got to grill them and steer them towards.
So there's a bit of back and forth between your proposal and their understanding of what they want.
Potentially even before you get to the proposal stage, just having a really good conversation early on to get a sense of them. You know, like, yeah, it saves you a lot of grief later on. Like, there's no, however much paddling you've done to produce a design, or even in the worst case scenario to make a painting, to have them go, oh, that's not what I was expecting. I'd rather not pay you. Like,
has that ever happened? So you've done the work and they've welched
back in the day
on the pay because they didn't like it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Way back. That's a motivator for talking more.
Wow. Contract law.
Yeah, well, there's that too. Yeah. But
do your jobs have written contracts, or are they always verbal contracts?
Varies. There's no
Depends
one
on the size.
style. Who you're dealing with. Yeah. If I'm dealing with institutions, I've had that lift shaft was a 45-page document.
Whoa.
You know, including stuff like I had to guarantee
another arm on the octopus.
Yeah. Oh, it was
coming to strangle you.
Much more like something that has more arms than an octopus. You know, I had to guarantee that I wouldn't produce the same work or a really similar work within the next 12 months. I had to guarantee that the work would exist.
So in that contract, you would have
months.
found your definition between difference and sameness.
Yeah.
Maybe we should look there for our philosophical question of how much variation there is between artworks.
True. I figured that would be something I could argue within my practice, and wasn't too worried about that. I noted
you'd argue it after the fact.
Yeah.
If you needed to do a...
Yeah. It's in a different space. It's an entirely different work. Just because it's the same vulture and falcon doesn't mean it's the same work. So, yeah. It was good, but it was hard, that one. But yeah, kind of stuff that happens.
There's many philosophical questions about art as we understand it or don't understand it brings up. You know, that I think that's part of its job. It's, you know, for example, is when does an artwork stop being an artwork? You know, does it have to be made by the artist? Can it be made by a fabricator, or can it be made by studio assistants? And then how much can it be made by studio assistants? You know, when does it cease to be art? When does it shift into simply product? There's lots of thinkers that have, you know, written and thought about these things after Andy Warhol in the 50s and 60s was doing his kind of commercial...
He was on at the National Gallery recently, wasn't he?
They've got some in
Oh, yeah, in their American something's giants.
Can of soup, whatever it was.
American giants,
Soup can,
Yeah. So does your artwork ever have a production line process to it, and you do massive copies of the same thing like Hoon is talking about?
Something sort of like that with your... You didn't really sell those, but you had like 20 or 40 of those. Just that one sort of character. Different animals, but it was that one.
Oh, they did. They did. Most of them have gone now.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not having to store them. So yeah, I try to early on.
Seems in contradiction to what you're saying before about everything being different.
No,
Well,
you could say that's an addition.
That's an addition. So I used to edition stickers. So I used to, whenever I made a sticker, I would make 25 copies of it.
Sorry, edition, not addition.
Yeah,
Is that right?
edition.
Edition, yeah.
Yep, yeah.
Series or editions are
Yeah.
legitimate.
So I'd do my studio research. I'd have my play. I'd solve a little composition. I'd then make that as a sticker. I'd make 25 of that composition in those colours, and then probably never repeat that again.
And you'd put them up.
Yeah, and then I just
in public spaces.
donate them to the community. Yeah. So,
Donate them to the community.
yeah.
Is that littering?
No, it falls somewhere ambiguous. Yeah. It depends where you are. There are parts.
Vandalism.
There are
Is
parts.
it vandalism?
Again, it's ambiguous because of the scale and because of the permanence of it.
Well, vandalism is breaking something. So if you're adding to a space that is addition with your edition,
Yeah.
then is that breaking something?
But is putting more paint on something but lots of people argue that putting more paint on a wall is better for the wall.
Okay, but
You know,
what do you think?
I don't mind.
You don't mind?
Yeah, I engage in that kind of thinking, talking, because it's interesting, not because I care.
So are you a vandal? Is that an element of what you do? Is that an element of your art, however big or small?
Would you ever say that on radio or whatever? Would you ever say that? You couldn't.
Couldn't I?
I'm going bomb train.
Some people might. I
Yeah.
can. What can I do? Do the voice hiding?
Yeah.
What do they do with the
Yeah.
lower pitch thing?
Yeah. Just for that answer. Yes. Sometimes.
So the problem with that question is because if you say no on radio, then it's like, well, obviously he does because he
Yeah.
said no, but he's just saying it because
Yeah.
he's on radio.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, listeners, we have to bum that question.
Yeah.
There's no way we can answer that on
There is
radio.
no right answer there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think you're
And
a vandal.
we'll have to come back to it after Hoon's done her definitions podcast.
Definitions, that's right.
Vandalism's gone on the list. What is that anyway?
Yeah, list of things
Destruction.
to define. Yeah.
Nothing I do is destructing. It's always adding.
It's always adding. It's
So-
creative.
So, if you
And
think it's...
recycling.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd like to cycle back to that recycling thing, which is,
Yep.
do you get all fluffy and gooey inside about your feelings of the environment? So these artworks that you're creating out of recycled materials, is this because you'd call yourself an environmentalist? Or is there a bigger philosophical motive behind it? Or is it just necessity?
Shabby chic.
In the same way...
What's that?
The shabby chic aesthetic. That's his aesthetic.
What's shabby chic?
The Wabi Sabi aesthetic.
Wabi Sabi.
It's letting things have their own story.
Japanese aesthetic philosophy.
Okay, let me move the microphone.
No, you
Come back.
You walked into it now.
Hoon, you're part of this because you've butted in so much that I can't edit any of it.
I'm sorry.
So you're not off the hook. The question is, what is wasabi and hooby dooby?
Hoopy dooby.
I know I've got it wrong, but let's get the terms right.
Wasabi is the green horseradish thing that you put
Condiment.
on, that you add to your sushi. It's a Japanese thing also. Wabi Sabi is a Japanese aesthetic philosophy.
Wasabi, is that the thing that...
It's green and it gives you a head rush.
So there's a hot sauce.
That's the wasabi.
That's the wasabi, and then there's a what?
Wabi Sabi.
Wabi Sabi. So Wabi Sabi is the Japanese philosophical
Aesthetic
philosophy.
That the idea is that things that are worn, so like rocks that have had the rain erode them, that moss has grown on, or old brick walls that have been beaten by the weather, that over generations people have tried to fix and mend, that those things are
Let
not,
things build their own story.
and that they are beautiful, that they gain rather than lose because they lack newness. They gain beauty.
Is this similar to the pots that they break and then reassemble with the
Yes.
gold in between them?
Yes.
Does that play into the same
Sort of.
philosophy?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
And the way
That's
you,
exactly
the way you that mending of jeans, where you make an emphasis on the patch.
Or kimonos that
Yeah.
go through generations that have, beautiful, different.
So it's cherishing the object,
Mm.
and so the shabbiness of it speaks to its heritage.
So while it might come from a position of austerity, so poverty or not having enough resources, it actually has also got space enough in the Japanese aesthetic consciousness to be beautiful, so like peasant, peasant or farmhouse beauty, there's that whole trope as well, that, there's a whole lot of different ways of seeing things to be beautiful or not. Bling could be
Yeah.
really beautiful.
So to that end, I'm more interested in that kind of make, do, mend stuff than I am pure environmentalism, because it falls under the same thing. It's just basically making the best of what's at hand.
Even if it's a piece of chipboard Laminex, you could make that,
Yeah.
you could give that a new bit of love and recontribute it to the cycle of production and destruction
Yeah, you're kind of stalling stuff.
from just going to the tip.
Yeah, on this line of its life.
And so then he talks about value, therefore then that comes another philosophical question that Art throws up is what's valuable? Is it valuable if it's an old soup tin that's been squashed on the road that he's then put a fine tiny little figure on? How can that cost $500 on a gallery wall? So that's...
Shouldn't it be on a piece of canvas, stretched on a wooden frame that I can hang more easily?
Yeah.
So,
So I think, different artists address different parts of a set, probably an unending set of philosophical questions. I think that's part of the whole shtick
yeah.
of thinking, trying to bend your head around what is it to make objects. Some artists don't make objects, what is it to make, what is it to be innovative, to create yourself.
Yeah. So in the same way that I address and I'm attentive to graffiti writing, but I'm not really a graffiti writer. I'm attentive to environmental concerns and things like that, but I'm not an environmentalist as such, because everything's everything.
So the grand philosophical question bubbles up: what are you?
An
Yeah.
artist.
Yeah, just an artist. I get to ask questions and answer them.
And you could argue that he's political, but you could also argue that he's totally not political.
Yeah, they were having an argument here before in the workshop that all art is political, and some of them, and some
We've
of them are
heard
saying
people
no.
say that before, yeah.
But I think those binaries, I think the key to any definition actually, especially where we talk about art, where it's a cultural thing, is that there are no binaries. Binaries will always fall short. A binary is, a black and a white idea. Art is always political, art is not always political. That I think we're always going to fall short. It's always a triangulation or a dialectic. It's always a,
Yeah.
so that it
More legs on the
things-
octopus.
more legs on the octopus, and the octopus is the nexus between, and he's pulled between this leg and that leg and that leg and that leg, and they can live in discord. They coexist. They are symbiotic or not. Would you like another something?
Oh no, I think I'm okay with
Are you good?
It's really my privilege.
And will you cut it properly?
No.
No.
I'm not cutting any of this, Hoon. It's too hard to cut because your voice is like in the mix. And plus you're saying great philosophical stuff.
You're the conscience.
The collapse of binaries. Multi-perspectival,
Polyvocal.
multi-dimensional, aperspectival, paradigm comparison, full spectrum, thinking, planning, experiencing, artistic asceticism, with parameters blasted to the edges and definitions blurred. I can go on all day like this, by the way.
Lovely.
I'm just making it up.
Yeah, good.
You set me off.
That's,
It's so good that someone else is multi-dimensional, not just me. So, folks, if you're listening to this, or if you've heard my solo episodes, it's not just me that's full spectrum thinking. It's
Wow.
not come out of nowhere. So, thank
Wow.
you, Hoon. I'll link to your. Have you got an Instagram, Hoon?
Yeah, Dr. Hoon.
Okay, so I'll link to Hoon. I think I'll have to look that up. And I'll link to Byrd, Meltdown. I can look yours up as
Yeah.
well.
be bird-eyed.
Check out these guys on Instagram. Are they your main pages, the Instagrams, or have you got a website or?
I've got a
Something
website
like
in limbo. HannahHoon.com at some stage. It'll be there.
Yeah.
Have you got a website, Byrd?
Nah, I couldn't be bothered. I should. That's that, that chatty guy you were talking about before. The visible, connected guy. That's
He's
not
got the
me.
website.
He's got the website.
He's also got the nest egg.
Sometimes he throws me crumbs. Yeah.
Oh, it's a touchy subject.
Ah,
Let's not start beef on the radio, mate.
nah.
Keep your beef for the street where you can have a fist fight.
That's right. Keep it real.
Keep it real.
No, he's too big to have a fist fight with anyone. No one wants to pick fights with him.
You'd be surprised.
Except for me.
Except for your friend. What's he call himself?
Hello. Don't be scared. I know I'm scary at first. Hola, niños. ¿Cómo estás?
Oh, yeah. Of
Estoy
course.
bien.
Just say hola, sí, hola.
¿Cómo estás? What's amigo?
Amiga.
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 ¿Cómo estás, amiga?
No comprende.
A good-
Estoy confundido.
A good on the better side of good idea or definition for art that my former supervisor said one time was that art is a set of conditions, and I'm sure that he could lay that out for you in great, beautiful detail if you ever wanted to talk with him. So I think that's
So is a paradigm. Paradigm is a set of conditions. Or at least that's one way of coming at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think it's a good way of opening up, the binary of what is art. Come to the table.
Byrd, thank you so much
That's
for
right.
doing
It's
this.
been fun.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's wonderful ambience here. The outro music is so fun though. It's so up and dance and jump. Unlike a chill out, sit back like we are right now. I'm probably
Yeah.
going to play it anyway. Hoon, thank you as well.
My pleasure.
Do you want to speak into the mic?
Thank you.
Most of what you said won't be heard because of where you were sitting.
That's all right. That's just a teaser. You can get the full blast another time.
Can we? Can we do it? Have a full one? Alright. Maybe next week sometime. Well, I only have 2 microphones. I might have
No
to put
turntables,
it
2
in the middle
microphones.
and turn it up, blast it up. I don't know if it's as good as that hurts otherwise.
Because he's just talking to himself. Do you have to prepare a lot? Talk to
think-
yourself for an hour?
Yeah, I just think some of it is well prepared.